Okay, welcome everyone. I'm David Rammel, editor of Virtualization and Cloud Review, here to welcome you to our summit titled Trust No One Summit, Why You Should Modernize Your Security Posture with Zero Trust and How to Do It, brought to you by Rubrik. Before we start today's three-session event, we do have some announcements. First, we want to let you know this event is being recorded and will be available for future viewing. You'll receive an email when the replay is available, generally within the next few days. Also, each of today's three sessions will be followed by a 5 to 10 minute Q&A. So please be sure to put your questions into the Q&A area of your console as they come up so we can get them answered for you by our experts. And during today's third session, we will be giving away a NutriBullet Ultra Personal Blender. But you must be present to win, so be sure to stay on for the entire event. Finally, we do have resources from our sponsor Rubrik available on the console right now, so please download and check those out. It's because of Rubrik underwriting this content that we can bring you this summit, so we thank them for supporting the community and ask you to check out those resources so we can bring you more events in the future. Now on to the first session of today's summit, the case for Zero Trust. This session features Dave Kawula, Managing Principal Consultant at Tycon Elite Consulting, and Emil Cabot, Principal Consultant at Tycon Elite Consulting and 9-time Microsoft MVP. Dave is a Microsoft MVP with more than 20 years of experience in the IT industry. He's a leading technology expert for both local customers and large international enterprises. His background includes data communications and networks within multi-server environments, and he has led architecture teams for virtualization, System Center, Exchange, Active Directory, and Internet gateways. Emil specializes in enterprise data center and deployment solutions. Author of numerous books on modern technologies, he leverages his extensive experience with MSPs to guide organizations in optimal cloud adoption. He is actively involved in running MVP Days Online, blogging on checkyourlogs.net, and presenting at conferences such as Ignite, VMon, Tech Mentor, Tech Ready, and MVP Days Community Roadshow. Guys, it's great to have you here. Please take it away.
Awesome. Thank you very much, David, for the kind introductions. It's my real pleasure here to have you on, Emil. I know it's been a little while since we've had a chance to do one of these online sessions, and you know, this is really one of the best parts of my week is getting a chance to have these conversations. And what a relevant topic that we're going to be talking about here today with kind of the case for Zero Trust. So, Emil, you happy to be on here today?
Yeah, it's great to be here, David. So thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we get going, I think just in the state of world affairs that we're in right now, I think that this conversation around zero trust, cybersecurity, hardening infrastructure is just one that just continues to evolve in day-to-day discussions at almost every organization that we're at. Because at the end of the day, a posture of saying, well, it's not us, it's not going to hit us, it's not going to happen to us, it's only going to happen to upstream business partners, and you know, maybe knock on wood, we're just lucky we've never had a problem. You know, those types of discussions are disappearing for all the work that I'm doing in enterprise. I know you're seeing the same thing, Emil. And so when we look at how to take and head down this road of, you know, hardening infrastructure, moving into the world of zero trust, I think that moving forward today, one of the first gold nuggets of the session is that even if you made a handful of changes a day, you're making a difference. And so this whole process of hardening infrastructure can be very overwhelming and daunting for a lot of our infrastructure teams. And when I work with them, that's the advice I give them. Make small changes, move things forward. Every day, take a step forward, because sitting back and planning this for months and months and months is going to take and leave you in a very vulnerable state. You know, let's say at the end of the year, your goal is you want to make, let's say, 1,000 changes to improve your infrastructure. Well, start making a few a day, and at least you're moving that needle forward. What are you seeing out there, Emil, and kind of what's your thought of kind of the state of affairs right now in the world?
Well, just on to that, very much so, right? Don't let perfect be the enemy of good. As you go in and light up any of these tools, I'll pick on Microsoft Defender right now. The first time you go in and light that up and you've onboarded your devices, you're going to have a very, very low security score, guaranteed. There's a whole bunch of things in there that need to be fixed, and they're vulnerabilities, and it's dragging your score down. If you look at that and say, how do I need to get that to 100% by the end of the month, you're never going to get there. And the key is just to take it bit by bit. You can sort by priority and start taking the heavy hitters first. The biggest thing is not to do it too fast, because as we go through and lock down these vulnerabilities, these CVEs, they're at some point going to impact something in production. And if you've just gone through and made a bulk of 150 changes to get your score from 25 to 50, now you don't know what it is that broke. And going back at that point to try and figure out which one is going to take you a lot more work. So it is a process, but we just had to take it piece by piece and make sure that we do our due diligence and test properly, because as always, we don't want to just be throwing this stuff into production.
Well, and also, sorry, no, go ahead.
No, finish off, Dave.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, as the world evolves with cyber threats, one of the things that, we have to keep in mind is as we start driving that score up, this is a merry-go-round that you're on, everyone. This is a never-ending merry-go-round, because just as you nicely clean things up, there's going to be something else that's going to pop in. And so it's something that it's really hard for us in IT, because we like to delineate a start and a finish date to our projects. This is a never-ending project, unfortunately. I hate to burst everyone's bubble.
Yeah, and the big problem is once one of these vulnerabilities get identified in your tenant and it gives you something to do, those bad actors have gotten that same notification, right? So now it becomes a race to finish to see who gets there first, whether we get it protected or whether they can find a way to make use of the exploit, right?
Yeah,
so ultimately,
sure.
And a lot of times we don't know if we're being actively targeted, especially if we're just looking at starting to implement these things today. We don't have that visibility. We don't know if that attempt is even being made, right? So that's one of the things that we also need to do to find out and get monitoring on, is to really find out, is this something that I need to implement right now? Or can I safely take 2, 3, 4 days to test this out and implement it?
Well, right. And in this kind of principle of zero trust, it can be hard for IT teams to have multiple accounts that you have to use to log in inside of your infrastructure. We're used to basically having that single account that we're using to log into everything, and removing that stuff can be very difficult from a human element factor as well, as we go through and take a look at this. So I guess the starting point that we'll have here, Emil, for today's session is, let's dive in a little bit about looking at the traditional security model that we have. We typically have, 2 and 3 tier infrastructure. And the 2 and 3 tier infrastructure that we have inside of our racks is, we typically have some storage, and we'd have some networking gear, and we have some servers. Modern infrastructure is taking us to a 2 tier where we're hyper-converging that infrastructure. Great, we have something that's there. Then we have some type of connectivity that we're providing on the inside of the network with some switches that we're having distributed all throughout our campuses. Wonderful. Fiber, however we're connecting everything, MPLS networks. And then there's going to be some type of a perimeter that we're going to have. And that perimeter defense is typically some type of, hopefully, modern next-gen firewall that we're looking at as, defense mechanisms. And so that, ironically enough, I still see this at almost every organization I come to. And so it's a very standardized design that we have. And so, what are some of the things that we do from a perimeter perspective is that, okay, let's do some geo blocking. Let's do some country blocking. We're really worried about the state of affairs with, what's going on with Russia. Let's country block Russia. Let's take and go through some of these pieces. Well, modern threat actors are not kids sitting in basements and garages or kids at school, right? This is advanced state-sponsored threat actors that are coming through. For example, I'll give you one that I'm working on here this week. Is that we have phishing email come through at a customer of ours, and it was a high-level executive that ended up clicking on the link, and it actually took him to a .ru page that was actually hidden behind Cloudflare. And so the problem is that Cloudflare is a kind of global ENS provider, and they're going to take and they're going to mask that traffic, and so that connection punched through there. So that when you look at the IP address, it's owned by Cloudflare, which runs a lot of infrastructure in the world. So all of a sudden we're like, okay, immediately block that IP address. We looked it up, but when you dig into it, you're knocking out a whole bunch of additional services. So inherently, what's happening now, what I'm seeing with these attacks is they're shots across the bow, testing the security teams to see really what they're going to do. So now all of a sudden, if I can just fire shots across your bow, Emil, and you're going to immediately as a posture go, block the URL, block the IP address on the firewall. Well, guess what? We took down a whole bunch of services that was running inside of some of our physical locations that were really important. We took down some of the manufacturing cells because of that. And so it's just like that posture perimeter security is not enough anymore. You got to dig into some of these pieces. And so that's number one. Well, number two, go ahead.
The big thing there is, we have this great, physical security implementation in our organization. And, when it comes to manufacturing, that makes sense. With a lot of other organizations today, once you get behind that perimeter, the only thing inside it now are servers, right? Nobody's in the office anymore. Everybody's away, right? So now your access into your network is no longer contained within that perimeter, right? So the data is gone. Now you're talking about this attack going shot across the bow at a major manufacturing organization. You think, yeah, well, that's, somebody that would get targeted. I'm seeing the exact same thing with a small oil and gas company with 20 people, right? It's spray and pray, not just targeting the organization. They're looking to see anybody and everybody that's going to have these exposures vulnerable. Okay,
yeah,
there you go.
Absolutely. And so we actually have a great question that just came in here. And by the way, for those of you that are listening to the session today, Emil and I love to take sessions in line during the show. So if you have questions that are burning, fire them into the Q&A panel that you've got in your console. We'll get to absolutely as many as possible. So we've got a question here from I believe it's from James. It might be Lynn, I'm not sure. But so anyways, thank you very much for that question. We really appreciate it. And it's a really, really relevant one to what we're talking about, which is for organizations currently relying on legacy security models, what are the key challenges and considerations when transitioning to a zero trust architecture? And I just give a really short answer to this one is the people factor is going to be the hardest thing that you're going to have as a challenge. Your existing IT teams, if you're telling me that you've got legacy systems in place, that probably means you have a legacy thought process with your IT professionals that are working at that organization. As you move to modernize this with zero trust, you're also going to be leveraging tools and things that you can use to defend your network as well. And that's going to change and evolve the way that you're doing business. All right, so that human element, we'll talk about this a little bit as we go through the show, but that's a big one for it. The last one on this particular one with the traditional security model, this is one of the ones that is always of biggest concern. Is number one is the insider threats. So for example, the economy is it's struggling a little bit right now. We're coming out of global pandemic, and the reality of things is that we've got administrators that are inside of the network, and they have admin rights to certain areas and functions. And just so we're having an understanding that there is a program, dark web wise, where we can sell credentials, for example, for cash. And so that insider threat is something that, is of great concern, because once somebody is inside with any level of admin credentials, they're elevating, and then their time to actually executing an attack with either ransomware, where they're looking for some cash, they're looking to take and extort you by taking your data, or they're looking at something like jackware, where there's no real cost beyond just destroying your infrastructure. That can happen in a matter of hours. So we really have to watch those admin rights. All right, so let's jump into our first topic here that we've got around zero trust principles, Emil. And I will take you into the first one here, and I'll pass this one over to you. Assume breach. What does that mean? Like, assume breach? We're paying for modern defenses. We've got XDR solutions. We've got managed detection and response now. We've got antivirus solutions. We've got modern next gen firewall. Assume breach? Like, we're going to assume that somebody's already in the network? The answer is yes. It's not if you're going to get hit, it's when you're going to get hit. And there's a likelihood that somebody's already inside of a portion of your network. I just dealt with one this week where we had a malware alert that was triggered through our XDR solution. And it had hit 3 times. And when we went and we looked at the machine, I took a look at the local admins group, and there was 27 additional local administrators that were added. There was a script that was adding a new local admin daily, and they're changing the name. And so with local admin rights on that box, you can go ahead and you can bypass, nearly anything that's running on there. And so we can still catch it with the XDR solutions that are on there. But the problem is that, what type of damage and where were they reaching out to from there? And so that mentality of assume breach, what are you seeing in regards to that one specifically out in the field right now, Emil? And how are you seeing the customer base that you're dealing with deal with this?
I find it very hard to get specifically security teams to admit to this level, right, and start to track things back that way. But unfortunately, we're seeing it, right? It was just before Christmas. We had a client. This one was scary. We had a client, and their workstation was compromised. Anyway, long story short, what they ended up doing was modifying the local routing table on the workstation. They couldn't get payload onto the machine because the firewalls and everything in the environment were protecting it. So what they did was they ended up rewriting the local routing table on the machine so that when it downloaded this month's patches from Microsoft, it would download a specific patch from their servers instead. And because it was all handled through DNS and it was coming through content delivery networks, it was allowed, right? Because it was an accepted package, and the payload was able to get down, and using their rights, they were able to execute and launch the attack, right? And unfortunately, it's until we experience something to that degree that the eyes don't get opened.
Well, right, and then the other thing that I've seen happen a lot is loose desktop admin credentials. And so, for example, from a social engineering perspective, when I'm looking at this, I could just I could make your workstation really slow. It's not hard to make your workstation really low with limited rights, right? I can just bog down your machine with just ping commands. Right? I issue enough ping commands, I can bog down your machine, just increase packet size, and I'm gonna start jacking up your processor. It's gonna be slow. What are you gonna do? You're gonna call into the service desk. Okay, you're gonna call into the service desk. Now somebody's gonna log in with those local admin credentials to try to fix the situation. Well, the problem that you run into is that, this endpoint was one of these loose ones that was out there from when we added VPNs for everybody from COVID. And this workstation happened to be in somebody's home. And this workstation happened to maybe not have BitLocker or drive encryption on it. And it was very easy to just go brute force and reset the local admin password offline. And, because you don't have necessarily control over all of what's going on. And the other thing is that one of the next big gold nuggets for everybody is there's a concept of to bring your own device is very bad news for us in the security world, because we have next to no control over these devices. And more specifically, I have no control over somebody's 14-year-old kid going and clicking on who knows what on that machine, and the ability to take and lock down and control that admin access on there, right? And so that becomes very problematic. And so those breach points become very easy. And that's that kind of point about assumed breach. Everybody's asking, well, how does this happen? How does it happen? It's actually not as hard as you think, right? And so with zero trust, one of the things that comes into here is, the principle of least privilege. Admin rights for users, absolutely not. We escalate, we elevate on demand. Make sure that you're implementing Microsoft Laps, so you have separate admin credentials on every single box. And then there comes the principle inside of zero trust with what's called just-in-time access and privileged identity management, where we can basically request access for a specific period in time, and then those rights are taken away. Don't leave what are users and what are called privileged groups for an extended period of time. For example, many of us have worked with Active Directory, right? We've worked with Active Directory for now almost 25 years, believe it or not. I feel really old right now, Emil. But Active Directory on-prem, there's a group inside of there, a privileged group inside of there called Enterprise Admins and Schema Admins. Well, by default, people think that you have to be a member of those groups to do your day-to-day work, and it's not true. The only point of a Schema Admin is to extend the schema, so that group should actually be empty. And that leads into that point of, privileged identity management and least privilege, right? Just don't add yourself to additional groups that aren't necessary. And then make sure that you're monitoring this. You've got monitoring solutions in place to take and track changes to things like access to privileged groups, because one of the things that happens during a breach is the bad guys are going to try to elevate their credentials. So make sure you're monitoring for adds to domain admins and, changes to local admins. We can do all of this now through advanced threat hunting to track these capabilities, right? Now, when you're going to take and you're going to implement zero trust, because we're kind of at the beginning of this whole picture, you haven't implemented zero trust. What's one of the biggest problems that we face? When we're starting this and we're locking down accounts that had like global tenant admin rights to Office 365 and Azure and your other cloud providers that are out there, and saying, no, we're not just going to do that with a single account. We need to back this up. We need to take and have break glass accounts. And it's all of a sudden they're like, oh my gosh, I have 20 different accounts you need to log in with. Yes, get yourself a good password manager and make sure that you're going to take and you're going to balance that out, because having that single account is it's not a good idea, and it's not really supported anymore. So in regards to this human element, and when you're walking into an organization that's just picking this up, do you find there's a big resistance to change as you're starting this process?
Everywhere, specifically with the administrators and the executives. You walk into some organizations and there's 17 domain admins. There's 2 that should be there, right? So those 15 people, it becomes an HR issue, right? And, I've said for years, IT is not an HR tool. And we have a friend, what's Steve's quote about security not meant to be your friend?
Oh, security is not meant to be a matter of convenience.
Right. So that's it. And unfortunately, especially with us in IT and, in service desk or those of us that have worked in the service desk realm, as we've built up our career, we have this unquenchable need to make people happy, right? We work in a thankless job, and one of the things that gives us benefit is, seeing people enjoy when we fix something, right? Or when we make their job easier. This is not that, right? This is deliberately making your job harder. And unfortunately, that's the nature of the beast. There's nothing we can do about that. Yes, this is harder. Yes, the passwords are painful to type in. You cannot remember them. But this is the world that we live in. And unfortunately, basically, and what we've had to do a couple of times now is when people have come back and continually pushed back, went to the union about this, right? We ended up a couple of times having to give them paperwork to sign and basically make them assume risk. Because if they're not willing to follow along with our corporate standards, they're now a risk to the organization. So if your account now gets compromised and your account is what's used to ransom our organization, then you better be carrying insurance to cover that, because we're going to come after you.
Well, yeah, and along those lines, I was just involved in a project where we were taking out access to, totally business sites like Facebook, TikTok, Snapchat, WhatsApp, the usual suspects that are out there. And within one day, because with Defender, they have cloud app protection now, and you can actually see the landscape of what everybody's accessing through the XDR agents that are loaded on all of the endpoints. And so we go ahead and we block Facebook, thinking, okay, well, yeah, that's a smart move. Let's block Facebook. 450 users on Facebook in the organization. That's probably not everybody requiring access. And then the pushback that we got from this was actually from the marketing department, where they were actually using Facebook to find and hire new employees. So like, okay, fair enough. We'll open it up. And then, there was TikTok competitions that we were doing as well that nobody in IT was aware of. Okay, well, I guess we'll open that up too. And yeah, just some of those challenges, right? But one of the big things that I find, Emil, is building a security work culture is something that starts with one word. It starts with the word communication. And it's something that we often struggle with in IT. And so we need to make sure that we're having a constant level of communication with our end users, not just one-offs. So as the risks are increasing, one of the things, and this is another gold nugget for everybody, one of the things I want you to consider is have a weekly email that goes out to all users from IT, just in regards to the realm of cybersecurity. That's going to be 52 a year. I understand all of that, but it's going to be, hey, it's your friendly IT department here. We're noticing an uptick in the phishing campaigns. Just a reminder, always check the URL before you click on something. We do have measures implemented like safe links from Office 365 that are going to try to help us and protect. And you can start explaining some of these buzzwords to the end users, right? The consumers of the security solutions that we're putting in, because then we can have a realistic conversation with them when we have some type of an incident. And so it's not like, well, I didn't know that I wasn't supposed to do this, or I didn't know I wasn't supposed to click. No, we send the emails and we're informing everybody of these changes. Oh, hey, everyone, there's an uptick in, gift card scams. Your CEOs will never ask you to go buy gift cards. So if you get a request for that, it's not us, just as an FYI, right? But that word communication is so key.
ChatGPT is really good at generating these emails for you. Another thing that's really, really cool is once you've sent out a few of these, to find out if people are actually reading them and how socially vulnerable your organization is, specifically for you that are using Defender. Inside of Defender, you can create simulated phishing emails. And you can send those out to your users in your environment. And if they fall for the bait, you can get reporting back and then enrolling them in some lunch and learns to help make sure that they're more technically savvy.
The other piece of the cybersecurity and building a cybersecurity aware culture inside of not only your user bases, this is for IT as well. If you're using Defender right now, both Emil and I are Microsoft professionals, so we work a lot with Microsoft tools. So I understand there's other ones that are out there. So same idea. It's in your security portal. Give access to your entire IT team to the security portal, read-only access, so that they can see what's going on, because there's threat analytics in there. There's information they can read up on. Don't just rely on what's being kind of spoon-fed. Give them access. Let them see, because that's how you're going to train everyone around part of this process. We recently just did this at one of the organizations, And now we're getting a lot more buy-in because they're saying, wow, this is kind of real. And the other thing is in a lot of those tools, they'll give you a to-do list of things that you can work down. Start working down that to-do list, right? Because it's telling you, hey, these are the highest risk items, do them. And sometimes there's just some really easy low-hanging fruit that you can pick off as well.
Giving read-only access of that portal to your Tier 2 support team is probably one of the most valuable things you can do there. Give them access and show them how to hunt, because not only will they start resolving issues that normally get escalated up to the server or security teams, but also as an organization, you'll be able to find out which members of that team really pick up on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Now, I'm not going to focus on this particular topic too much because I noticed the next session coming up is more on getting the users onboarded and the kind of training and stuff that's going to be required. But one of my big things and pushback I get from users is you're breaking my application and my functionality that I require to do my job. All right. So if I'm like a CAD engineer or something like that, I need that CAD application to work. Yes, I understand that, but the code that's being used for that particular application is 20 years old. No, I need exactly this particular thing to do my job. And so that's a big piece of pushback that we get from the end users when we're walking this stuff down. And so when you're dealing with things like that, pick up the phone and get in touch with the software vendor and find out if there's a new version, cut a ticket, have those conversations. Because if you expect the consumers of the tech to do this, it's not going to happen. And so find out if there's an alternative approach to doing this and say, hey, listen, they've actually came out with this alternative rendering tool that we can use in high secure environments, and it fixes our problem. A little bit of training, couple days, you're on your way. Sometimes it's a lot more difficult, but just pick up the phone and actually, call and do some research on these pieces. All right. So from Microsoft's perspective, Microsoft is all in on Zero Trust. It is part of almost every discussion that we see now in regards to, the security frameworks that they're providing. And to the point, Emil, that I will say as few as like 4 years ago, Microsoft was kind of nowhere to be found on the Gartner Magic Quadrant for security. Like you didn't really think about, Microsoft as your go-to security partner that was out there. Now they're right up there as a leader. Why? Because holistically, they can manage the security end to end. And where they really, really shine is in the identity piece, because almost every organization has some form of Active Directory, hybrid Entra ID, or Azure AD is used to know it. And so that piece of it was huge, right? And so one of the things I'm gonna give you, and you're gonna get these little gold nuggets as we go, and this is gonna be one for you. Don't be a victim of next finished syndrome. And what do I mean by that? Okay, let's take an example of building a Windows 10 device. You can take and you can download boot media from Microsoft, and you can pop in the USB stick and you can install a copy of Windows 10 or 11, right? I would say that that's probably a fair statement. And probably anyone on this call has probably done this and done it multiple times. I know you can push out automated, but in that sense, that system is really next finish. Microsoft by default doesn't harden that stuff because they make it optimal for usability. It's up to you to harden it, okay? And so we have to harden those devices. Okay, I understand that. I get that. We'll harden the devices. Hardening your portals. When you go spin up Office 365 and you initially put in your credit card and you're the first one to build that portal, you basically have next finish. It's not coming to you pre-hardened. And the same thing goes for your Azure tenant and your identity inside of Entra. It is not all locked down by default. There are steps that you have to take to lock these pieces down. And for example, I know you do a ton of work with conditional access, Emil. Is conditional access fully configured by default, or are there things that individuals on this call need to look at before taking and lighting this up for your end users?
100%. There's not even templates for everything that you need.
And so what are some of the things that our audience should think about specific to like intra-hardening, conditional access, pieces like that? What are some of the things they should think about?
Well, I mean, the major thing about conditional access is protecting access to your data, right? So when you're creating those, you have to visualize the different places where people will be accessing your data from and whether you want that to be allowed or not. You also need to determine, what level of verification you want to have before you give someone access to confidential data, right? So, for example, if the organization doesn't want people to have to do multi-factor when they're in the office, then that's fine. We can configure that, right? But that will mean that we need to create two policies to ensure our access. We're going to have one for on-prem and one for off-prem, because I guarantee you everybody off-prem, we're going to want to have multi-factor, right? What level of control do we need to have when we're on public internet connections, right? One of the big problems that we still run into these days is shoulder attackers, right? Where people look over your shoulder when they're typing in a password. So if we're not using multi-factor off-prem, that becomes a very, very real concern. The other one is blocking access to countries, right? The majority of your attacks are going to come from 10 countries. So we have to create that policy. That's not default. And it requires a little bit more steps than everything else, but we need to actually find out where our end users are. We implemented one a couple of months ago for a union, and it turned out that one of the executives was actually in Tunisia dealing with his mom who was in the hospital. He hadn't told anybody at work, and we ended up blocking him out, and it caused a lot of problems. So, right, you need to find out exactly what that is and what you can safely block. Now, unfortunately, when it comes to blocking foreign countries like that, I mean, personally, I want to go as restrictive as possible. So we're in Canada, and Dave and I do a lot of work with the Canadian federal government. So, with people that interface strictly with inside of the same country, we don't allow any access to our Office 365 environment from anywhere. Right now, people travel. So we need to have that policy now put in place. And unfortunately, it becomes procedure for everyone. When you're traveling, if you want to work or have access to work while you're traveling, then you're going to need to put in a request.
Yeah, absolutely, Emil. And so along those lines of, protecting organizations, multi-factor authentication is one that I know that everyone on this call has heard about. I don't know how deep you're in with your configurations on this, but here's the rule of thumb that you have, is that if you RDP to it, MFA it. If you have privileged devices or networks, for example, that give you out-of-band access to your servers, MFA that. And I'm talking about IPMI, ILO, DRAC, those out-of-band networks that you have. For goodness sakes, reset the default passwords as well. But you can easily take and get MFA solutions in place for those. Maybe not necessarily all Microsoft. There's other great vendors that do multi-factor, and I don't really talk vendors on these calls, but there are great vendors that are out there that do it, right? And so along those lines, we take a look at, some of the additional security measures that you can take. What are your thoughts on, organizations moving to passwordless authentication? You've got Hello, you've got facial rec, you've got fingerprint, you've got so many different ways that you can go passwordless now. You're seeing a big adoption, or are we still seeing, a lot of requirements for passwords that are out there?
I don't see a lot of people going to passwordless yet. People are interested in it. But in order for passwordless to work, you really have to be comfortable with multi-factor, because the authentication now comes from, another place, right? It doesn't just let you in. So a lot of organizations, it really becomes down to a policy thing, and just getting that policies rewritten. It's hard enough right now to try and get everybody to do MFA when off-prem. So I think we have one client that has went to passwordless. They were new, and it was a incentive to using the new tech.
Awesome. All right. So the next one I want to talk about in regards to zero trust and looking at holistically your infrastructure. Device compliance is a big one as well too, because we saw this in early days when you'd go on to log into a VPN, and there would be kind of pre-authentication scripts that would run before we would let you into your infrastructure, right? We want to make sure that you're running the antivirus client, and the antivirus client has the latest definitions. And if you don't have the latest definitions, the script that's going to hit you in the quarantine zone is going to take and is going to force you to do this, right? So now in the modern world of device compliance, we kind of do something similar, but now what we're going to do is, instead of throwing you into a quarantine zone, we can actually create conditional access policies for devices that fall out of compliance to actually not be able to authenticate, or we can shield them and have them do other things. And so that part of it is a big piece of this. And so I know a lot of you on this call are probably using Intune for your MDM right now. And so this is a piece that's very integratable inside of there with your CA conditional access policies. And so Emil, are you seeing organizations having a combination of that with their conditional access policies and integrating that with device compliance?
100%. A lot of, especially with devices being offline more these days than normal. We don't have, machines that are now online 24 hours a day. They spend a lot of time in bags. And people will bring their machines on and quickly do something and then turn them off again. And that doesn't give the machine enough time, right, to upload all of its information to complete its cycle. So this will ensure those stragglers are getting patched before they get completed. The other part where this really gives us value is back to that bring your own device scenario that you mentioned earlier, Dave, right? By using conditional access, device compliance, and what we call app protection policies in Intune, I can safely allow end users to access corporate data on their personal device. And then in those situations, I still retain access to the data. I retain control of the data. And what I do is, through the conditional access policies, I'm going to state that the machine, must have a specific patch level or must have antivirus or encryption present before it can access the data. And then if the machines aren't compliant, what happens is, because I don't manage the machine, I can't remediate it myself, right? So the end user gets a message and says that your device is not compliant, fix this, and then you could try again and access. So it allows us to sort of start to let people use their personal devices without too much risk.
Awesome. Well, Emil, we got a question that just came in here, and I'll let you take this one. So in the context of zero trust, how do you address the challenge of balancing security requirements with the need for productivity, especially in environments where quick access to resources is essential for day-to-day operations?
Security is everybody's concern. So if the organization is used to being able to, log into their machine and be able to do X within 30 seconds, and now it's going to be a minute and 30 because of additional security requirements, then really two things need to happen. Is one, we need to find out if we can reduce that time. But two, process needs to be updated, right? Because at the end of the day, yes, it's not going to be as easy as it always was. It's not going to be as quick as it always was to get in, but it is more secure and it will keep your organization up, right? It goes down to this is now a huge risk. And although, in large scale, right, we've got a 200,000 node environment, a minute per endpoint is a lot of time. But what happens if that entire organization goes offline because of a ransomware attack?
Well, and in lines of that, we're seeing this on almost a daily basis with the threat actors coming in. We've got APP groups that are coming and attacking us all the time. And, one of the pieces in taking and going through this implementation, we got a lot of great sessions that are going to be coming up shortly right after us here. But just if I had to pick a couple things that we want to talk about with just gaining gaining adoption for Zero Trust, one of the biggest pieces for me is making sure that you set realistic expectations around the timing of getting to the point of where you want to be. Don't come into this thinking that, in 30 days, we're going to have all of our security problems fixed. It's not like that. We're going to move the needle forward in 30 days, but is everything going to be fixed? No. At the end of the day, I don't think everything is ever going to be fixed because the threat landscape changes on an hourly or daily basis for us, right? If you watch the CVEs that are coming into your organization, you'll have new ones that are popping in almost every day or almost every other day. I'll take a great case in point. Our good friends at Citrix have absolutely been hammered with critical CVEs, and they just had a release that came out saying, we're advising within 7 days, go patch all your NetScalers that are out there. Well, I'm going to tell you, there's a lot of NetScalers that are out there in the world front-ending a lot of that Citrix traffic. Citrix alone has made a lot of work for my infrastructure teams in the last year. But, you've got to do it, right? And so the other piece around this is resourcing around this. Don't sell yourself short on your team saying, the existing server support team is now going to take care of doing all of the hardening and infrastructure pieces. Security is an investment for an organization. I think of it as like insurance. And so when we take a look and we're doing this, especially as proactive security measures, make investments in resources. I know cybersecurity professionals are hard to find out there right now, but make some investments here surrounding this piece. We're going to move. We've got time for one more quick topic, and then we're going to take a couple more questions, Emil. And this next one's going to be for you because I know that you have done a ton of work surrounding, AI, ChatGPT, some of these pieces. What's the future for security for those listening on this call in regards to integrating AI as part of your cybersecurity posture?
Well, yeah, this is absolutely huge, right? And it goes back to what I was talking about earlier when a CVE gets published. They're using AI, right? And they're using machine learning. So we need to have those same tools on the back end just to be able to protect against that, right? The uplift in large learning models in the last 14 months has been absolutely insane, right? No product ever has had this kind of uplift. And it's amazing just trying to get your head around what's available now and what to use. It makes it even more so. But yes, find a solution. There are really, really good ones out there now by the big names. Microsoft has a co-pilot for just about everything, right? And so we definitely need to be looking at how we can include that in our security posture.
And I think one of the other big pieces here, too, is that your Zero Trust configurations are not limited to your on-prem infrastructure. It's got to be on everything. Cloud environments, multi-cloud environments, it's on-prem. It's just that general posture that you have. Great question just came in from Brian. Thank you for that one. On the topic of AI, Emil, what are your thoughts on Copilot for Defender? And just before you jump into that, so for me, really quick 2-second piece on this, that is like having an entire SecOps team at your fingertips right now, available for you to help. And for example, one of the things I really like about it is the root cause analysis pieces saying, hey, this particular incident just took place and I need some help with, writing up root cause surrounding this and how we can potentially prevent this in the future. Help me with it. Boom, you're done, right? And so having those pieces of AI, I think, are huge, especially in your security tenant. And I'll leave the rest to you, Emil, because I don't think we as humans can keep up fast enough with the amount of information that's being driven at us from a security perspective.
No, and when we're going through an attack, like when we're going through a recovery or an active attack, there's a lot of things going on. We're pulled in so many different ways. It's very, very easy to get pigeonholed into a troubleshooting solution, right? You assume this is the problem and you start going down. And it may not be, until an hour and a half where we realize that, oh yeah, there is another way that this could be happening. Copilot will be great for that, right? Because not only can it help us, but it can also offer suggestions or places to look inside of our environment. This type of an attack, right, could be construed to attack this rather than this. So did you check here, right? And so just helping to offer suggestions or having, ultimately you're having another security expert at your fingertips, right? It's the key right now is getting that model focused down to the security level that we need, while still being modern enough to be useful for zero-day threats.
Absolutely. And so, Emil, we're going to wrap this up with one quick thought each here, okay? And so my closing thought on this, and the last thing for individuals on our session here to take away, is security can feel very overwhelming for everyone because there are so many different aspects that we feel that we need to take and we need to learn, and the pace of that learning is very challenging. So don't feel like you have to do everything. You need to have a certain baseline level to get started with this, but find partners that are experts in different domains with this. And so one of the things to look at is something called managed detection and response, not just where you're getting alerts, because my biggest concern is that the bad guys, the threat actors, they work 24 hours a day, they work all year long, and at a certain point in time, I'm going to be in bed. My team's going to be in bed. I don't run a 24-hour shop for our IT, right? And a lot of us are like this. So what goes bump in the night is of great concern to me. So those managed detection and response teams, there's many great ones that are out there. They're the ones that are going to help you. What you're looking for there is that when something happens, I want them to have the ability to isolate at a network level those devices that are potentially being compromised. I want them to start the investigation. I want them to potentially be able to get into my firewalls to adjust things. It's a very big partnership and trust factor that you get into with this. And I have a couple customers right now that are fully on board. And let me tell you, it's very interesting, even so interesting to the point that because they have full MDR solutions, basically full coverage for every hour and every minute of the day, cyber insurance premiums went way, way down for them by like almost 70%. So that's kind of my closing thought. So, Emil, closing thought, and then we'll hand it back over to David.
Microsoft is great at giving us amazing products that can do everything once they're configured. And they often, give us the blank vanilla infrastructure to set up as we deem appropriate. They've realized so many people are not using conditional access policies that they've started this year to create managed conditional access policies, and they're rolling them out to every single Microsoft 365 tenant. And the first one is just to make sure a multi-factor authentication is enabled. Conditional access is so important that Microsoft has broke one of their own big rules. and they're starting to manage things for everybody. That's my one thing. Go through your conditional access policy. If you're using Microsoft 365 in any capacity at work, or you're using Entra in any capacity at work, make sure you have those conditional access policies created, and make sure you create your break glass accounts for those policies at the same time. That's the one biggest thing you can do right now without going through your advanced threats to secure yourself.
Awesome. Well, Emil, unfortunately, we are at the end of our time for the session. Thank you so much for joining me today. And with that, I'm going to hand it back to my esteemed colleague, David Rammel. And thank you, everyone, for attending, and enjoy the rest of the show.
Okay, great stuff, David and Emil. Thanks for a great presentation and answering all those questions.